Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH1502, Introduction to Community Media. And this is the lecture overview for week number 16. I just realised I've said 16. Let's change this. There we go. And the topic of what we're going to cover this week is about the idea that community media is a form of representation of civic life. So that kind of area of our social interactions, which are kind of engaged around civil society and kind of politics and representation, and how these things are played out in the relationship between mainstream media and informal daily practices and what we call the public sphere. So I've posted the lecture slides. I've not posted the lecture slides, up to the wiki. Because there's diagrams and clips in there, but I have posted the lecture notes. They're available to download and look at now. Remember where the wiki is, wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk. So the idea is to think about civic participation as something which is a slightly more formal way that we engage in social activity. And it's kind of based around, if you like, the stake that we have in our daily lives, and who decides what, when are people represented in the need to allocate resources, pay taxes. So kind of politics, if you like, but with a small p, politics. So kind of civic representation, daily life, legal rights, advocacy of social rights, those kind of things. And it comes from, we're going to look at in more detail about the idea of what facilitates our civil social life. And the concept that we'll look at in some detail is the idea of the public sphere, which is most widely associated with Jürgen Habermas, who was a political theorist who kind of used the emergence of the coffee house in the 18th century as a kind of model, as a way for a metaphor for the way that civil society involves debate, discussion, deliberation, representation, and kind of it's the conversations and news and the conversations that we have as a group in order to be able to figure out what we're doing, figure out what we should invest in, what we should avoid doing, what we should legislate on, what we should prescribe, what we should enable, where our rights lie, who has legal responsibility for different things in our social world. And the argument is that without a free press, without a free media, you can't have a robust civil society, because there's the public space, the public sphere, and there's the private sphere. And where does the government get involved? Where does the force of social legitimation, the administrators, where does the keeper of laws and the promoter of defence and well-being, at what point what are the limits on the government's involvement in our interactions? And the argument is that the government should stay out of the public sphere, and that it should be a balance to the private sphere, that the government shouldn't interfere with the private sphere, because we have liberal freedom of thought. The ideas that we exist in our own heads are kind of pretty important and an integral part of Western democracy and Western civilization. So this is tied into the idea of democratic media cultures and a form of active citizenship, which leads to a kind of sustainable communication and the kind of values that we respect of diversity, the kind of Western European progressive values, if you like, about diversity, respect, openness, transparency, accountability. All of those kind of things are promoted as a good idea in themselves. So we'll look at this in terms of the relationship with community media, and often community media is said to be a kind of third sector, along with other community organisations and charities and things like that. It's described as the third sector. It's not the government, it's not commercial operators, it's not the commercial economy, but it's a regulated sector that works in the civic realm. So we end up with things like the priority in this debate is for citizens to gain access to resources and facilities and platforms as a way in which to develop and engage in debate and discussion and representation. However, there's a divide between those who are able to successfully participate in these debates and those who aren't, and that's often because they don't have access to the services, the platforms, the resources and the facilities. So the job of community media is to promote in a very open way and to lower the barriers of participation to access to mainstream media and to other forms of media. Now this is on the basis that there's a kind of sense of emergence of what we might call, rather than kind of citizenship and what we might call publics. So rather than thinking of people as audiences or as consumers, we can think of people as a public. That's a constituent body of people who emerge through the practice of citizenship. And it's important because what it does is it addresses different elements of different publics at different times. So we exist in different ways as different components within the same kind of unified civil society, which is broken down into a range of different, often overlapping and competing kind of public characteristics. But underpinning this is the idea that technology is changing, that our empathy for our fellow women is changing, and that we need to think about ways in which we can manage the kind of emerging worlds and the differences that are, from the past experiences, and what are the kind of tools that we'll need, what are the kind of civic participation tools that we'll need for in the future, so that we're able to recognise and respond to the kind of differences and the emerging values that are coming out of the social interactions that we are engaged in at the present. So there's some reading to do with the lecture. We're looking at the Ellie Rennie book, Chapter 6, Access Reconfigured, which is a very useful chapter summary. I've also posted some... I've not posted a video yet for you to watch, but I'll have a look for something over the coming days, and I'll get that posted up before the lecture on Tuesday. So I'll see you at the lecture.